The silence in our marriage had become a language of its own, a dialect of unspoken resentments and questions. I was too afraid to ask. Marcus and I had built a beautiful life, a fortress of shared dreams with the final cornerstone about to be laid our first child. I cherished the tiny flutter in my belly as a secret promise between us. But then I discovered his secret, a promise he'd made to someone else. He wasn't just breaking my heart. He was building a second life on the rubble of ours. And the day he took her to a baby scan, I decided it was time to tear his world down to the studs. The Carter residence in the manicured suburbs of Chestnut Hill was a testament to meticulous planning. It was a classic Georgian revival, all symmetrical windows and stately brick, a house I had personally helped redesign. I'm Amelia Hayes, an architect, and I find comfort in structure, in blueprints where every line has a purpose. For 7 years, my life with Marcus Carter had felt like a perfect blueprint. He was a charismatic, ruthlessly successful hedge fund manager, a man who moved through the world with an unnerving confidence that I'd once found magnetic. Our life was a series of beautifully executed plans: the wedding, the house, the calculated career moves. Finally, the baby. After 2 years of trying, the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test felt like the final triumphant flourish on our masterpiece. Marcus had wept. He'd held me against his chest, his expensive Tom Ford suit be damned, and whispered, "Everything, Amelia. We finally have everything." But in the months that followed, the architecture of our marriage began to show hairline fractures. At first, they were almost imperceptible. Late nights at the office became more frequent, explained away by a volatile market. Business trips to Singapore and London were booked with less than a day's notice. When he was home, he was a ghost in our machine of a house, his body present, but his mind elsewhere. The easy laughter that once filled our cavernous living room was replaced by the tap-tap-tap of his fingers on a second work-only phone he now carried. "It's just for international clients, honey," he'd said, kissing the top of my head in a way that felt more like a dismissal than affection. "Keeps the time zones straight." I wanted to believe him. I was pregnant hormonal, and my world was narrowing to due dates and nursery colors. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the pressure of impending fatherhood was simply manifesting as stress. The real tremor, the one that cracked the foundation wide open, came on a Tuesday. I was 17 weeks along. The morning sickness had finally subsided, and I was feeling a fragile sense of optimism. Marcus had left early for a board meeting. I was working from my home office, reviewing blueprints for a new city library, when a notification popped up on our shared family calendar on my laptop. We used it for everything: dentist appointments, dinner reservations, bill due dates. The entry was for the following Thursday at 2 p.m. It read, "Baby's first scan. I." My breath caught in my throat. My own 20-week anatomy scan was scheduled for the week after. I stared at the entry, my mind refusing to process the implication. Baby's first scan. Whose baby? And who was I? My first thought was that it was a mistake, a typo. Maybe he was planning a surprise for me, but the cold dread coiling in my stomach told me otherwise. I clicked on the event details. It was created by Marcus. The location was not my OB-GYN's office, but a private boutique clinic across town, the Genesis Prenatal Imaging Center, a place known for its high-end ultrasound packages and extreme discretion. My fingers trembled as I typed the name into a search engine. The clinic's website was filled with glowing testimonials from wealthy clients. This wasn't an NHS clinic. This was a luxury experience. The letter burned into my retinas. Isabella. The name surfaced from the depths of my memory like a piece of wreckage. A few months ago at a fundraiser for the museum, Marcus had spent a little too long talking to a striking brunette in a green silk dress. She was an art gallery assistant he'd mentioned casually later. Her name was Isabella Rossi. I remember thinking she was beautiful, and I remember the flicker of annoyance I felt at how she touched his arm when she laughed. Marcus had dismissed it. She's just a kid, Amelia. Ambitious. Trying to network. The blood drained from my face. My hands went cold. I stood up my own baby, fluttering inside me as if sensing my distress, and walked on autopilot to his home office. The room was immaculate, just as he'd left it. His work laptop was closed on the desk. His personal one, the one we shared, was the one I used. But the second phone, the international one, was sitting on the charger. He'd forgotten it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I'd never violated his privacy before. Our marriage was built on trust, or so I'd thought. But trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. My hand shook as I picked it up. It was unlocked. I didn't need to dig deep. The message thread at the top was with a contact saved as Isa. I opened it. The screen was filled with a language of intimacy that was not ours. Hundreds of messages. Pet names. Good morning, my love. I miss you. Can't wait to see you tonight. And then I scrolled down my vision, blurring with tears. Isa. Are you sure Amelia doesn't suspect anything, Marcus? She's completely wrapped up in her own pregnancy. She doesn't have a clue. You and our little peanut are my future. You know that. Isa. I'm so excited for the scan on Thursday. To finally see him or her, Marcus me too. I'll tell Amelia I have a last-minute meeting. It's all taken care of. I love you. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the mahogany desk. The sound echoed in the silent house. He didn't just have a mistress. His mistress was pregnant, and he was using the same loving words, the same promises of a future on both of us. We were two different projects, two separate blueprints for a life he was trying to build simultaneously. I sank into his leather office chair, the scent of his cologne clinging to the upholstery, and I felt a grief so profound it was physical. It was a pressure in my chest, a hollowness in my gut. I wasn't just losing my husband. I was losing the entire reality I had meticulously built and believed in. The tears came, then hot and silent. I didn't sob. I just let them stream down my face, mourning the death of the man I thought I married. After an hour, or maybe it was 2, the grief began to cool. It hardened into something else, something cold and sharp and clear. Anger. I was an architect. I knew that when a foundation is rotten, you don't patch it up. You demolish it. You clear the site. And you build something new, something stronger on your own terms. My baby kicked a tiny, insistent pulse. It was a reminder. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I wiped my tears, picked up my own phone, and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in months, but a contact I knew I would need. Naomi, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It's Amelia. I need a lawyer. No, I need a shark. Naomi Bennett had been my best friend since university. We were an odd pairing, me, the measured architect who found beauty in lines and angles, her, the fiery litigator who found it in a perfectly executed cross-examination. While I built things up, Naomi was an expert at tearing them down to their essential legal truths. When she answered the phone, her voice was warm, but it turned to ice as I laid out the facts in a flat, emotionless tone. The bastard was her first succinct analysis. The absolute gold-plated trust fund bastard. He's taking her to a private swan on Thursday at 2. I said, my voice devoid of the tremor I felt inside. The Genesis Center on Albright Avenue. Good, Naomi said, and I could hear the clicking of her keyboard. That's our stage, public but contained. Perfect. I spent the next 48 hours in a fugue state, moving through my life with the detached precision of a robot. I made Marcus his morning coffee. I asked about his board meeting, and smiled blandly as he spun a web of lies so intricate it was almost impressive. He spoke of quarterly reports and shareholder anxieties, and all I could see was the text message, "You and our little peanut are my future." Each lie was another brick in the wall he was building between us, and it was a wall I was now meticulously planning to bring down. While he was at the office, I was in Naomi's. Her corner office overlooking the city felt like a war room. Papers were spread across a vast glass table. Naomi dressed in a razor-sharp suit, paced like a caged tiger. "Okay, Amelia," she began, pointing a pen at me. "We can go in there, and you can scream at him. It would be cathartic, I'm sure. But he'll paint you as the hysterical, hormonal wife. Men like Marcus are masters of flipping the narrative. We are not going to give him that satisfaction. We are going to hit him with something he understands." "And what's that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Naomi stopped pacing and leaned over the table, her eyes glinting. "Consequences. Financial, legal, and social. We're not just going to expose him. We're going to hamstring him." Our plan was audacious and required moving at lightning speed. Naomi explained that a simple confrontation was fleeting. We needed leverage. The affair and the second pregnancy were our moral high ground, but the law cared more about assets than broken hearts. "He's funding this entire second life," Naomi reasoned. "The gift's her apartment, I bet my salary. He's leased a place for her. The dinners, the medical bills. Where is that money coming from?" "Our joint accounts. His salary," I offered. "Exactly. Marital assets. He is actively draining the resources of the marriage to support his infidelity. That's not just immoral. It's financial malfeasance. It's a breach of fiduciary duty to the marital estate." She said the words with a grim satisfaction. The first step was to prove it. Naomi had a man for that. Not a private investigator in the trench coat and fedora sense, but a forensic accountant named Mr. Davies, who was a bloodhound for digital paper trails. While I pretended to be choosing between duck egg blue and seafoam green for the nursery walls, Mr. Davies was deep in the digital labyrinth of our finances. Marcus, in his arrogance, had been sloppy. The report came back less than 24 hours later. It was a gut-wrenching validation of my worst fears. A lease agreement for a luxury condo on the waterfront, signed by Marcus Carter 3 months ago. Credit card statements filled with charges from Cartier Chanel and exclusive restaurants I'd never been to with him. And the most damning piece of evidence, a wire transfer of $50,000 to Isabella Rossi, with the memo line reading "For our new beginning." Seeing it all in black and white, the sheer scale of his deception was staggering. He wasn't just cheating, he was building an entirely separate, lavish existence. Armed with this evidence, Naomi drafted an emergency petition. We weren't filing for divorce. Not yet. That was a move to be made from a position of power. This was different. We were petitioning for an ex parte temporary restraining order. This TRO will do two things, Naomi explained, her voice precise. First, it will immediately freeze all major joint bank accounts and investment portfolios. He won't be able to move a dime without a court order. Second, it grants you temporary exclusive use and possession of the marital home. He will not be allowed to set foot on the property. Can a judge grant that so quickly? Without him present, I asked the scope of it, making me feel dizzy. That's the ex parte part, Naomi said with a thin smile. It means from one party. We are presenting evidence that immediate and irreparable harm will be done to the marital estate if we wait for a full hearing. He's actively liquidating assets. The judge will grant it. I'll make sure of it. She was as good as her word. On Wednesday afternoon, Naomi called me from the courthouse. "We got it," she said, a note of triumph in her voice. "Signed and sealed by Judge Miller herself. The order is active the moment it is served to him." The plan was set. Naomi had hired a professional process server, a stoic man named Frank, who would accompany me. I was to serve Marcus the papers myself. The law didn't require it, but Naomi and I agreed it was a necessary piece of theater. "He needs to see you," Naomi had insisted, "not as a victim, but as the agent of his downfall. He needs to see that you did this, you." On Thursday morning, I woke up before dawn. The house was silent. Marcus was sleeping soundly beside me, his arm draped possessively over my growing belly, even in his sleep. The hypocrisy was so profound it almost made me laugh. I carefully slid out of bed and went to the closet. I didn't choose a power suit like Naomi would have. I chose a simple, elegant, navy blue maternity dress. It was a dress Marcus had bought for me a month ago, telling me how radiant I looked in it. I did my hair and makeup with meticulous care. I wanted to look beautiful. I wanted to look strong. I wanted to be the very picture of the woman he was throwing away. When I was ready, I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. My hand rested protectively on my stomach. The baby was quiet, as if sensing the impending storm. In my other hand, I held a large manila envelope. Inside was the court order. It felt heavier than any blueprint I had ever carried. It was the plan for the demolition. I met Frank, the process server, at a coffee shop a block away from the Genesis clinic. He was a large, impassive man who looked like he'd served papers in every dramatic situation imaginable. "You ready, Mrs. Carter?" he asked, his tone professional but not unkind. "It's Ms. Hayes, actually," I replied, my voice clear and cold. "Amelia Hayes." It was the first time I had consciously reclaimed my own name. He nodded slowly. "Okay, Ms. Hayes. I'll be right behind you. Just give me the signal." We walked to the clinic. It was exactly as I'd pictured, discreet, modern, with a frosted glass door. I took a deep, steadying breath, the crisp afternoon air doing little to calm the frantic beating of my heart. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a declaration of independence. I was no longer a character in Marcus Carter's story. I was about to become the author of my own. The waiting room of the Genesis Prenatal Imaging Center was an oasis of forced tranquility. Soft classical music trickled from hidden speakers. The color palette was a soothing blend of beige and cream, and the chairs were plush leather that sighed when you sat down. It smelled faintly of lavender and money. It was the kind of place designed to make you forget the messy, clinical reality of what was happening, and instead sell you an experience. I chose a seat in the corner, my back to the wall, the large manila envelope resting in my lap. Frank, the process server, took a seat near the door, idly flipping through a magazine. a silent, imposing gargoyle in this temple of new life. I checked my watch. 1:55 p.m. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but on the outside I projected a stillness I did not feel. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my mind. I would not cry. I would not scream. I would be surgical. At precisely 2:01 p.m., the frosted glass door swung open. And there they were. Marcus was holding the door for her, his hand resting on the small of her back. He was smiling that dazzling, confident smile that had once been reserved for me. Isabella Rossi was even more striking up close. She was younger than me, perhaps 26, with wide, dark eyes and a cascade of black hair. She was wearing a stylish, flowing maxi dress that accentuated her own small, neat baby bump. She looked radiant, happy, and completely oblivious. They approached the reception desk, their voices low and intimate. Marcus gave his name, his real name, the arrogant fool, and the receptionist. A polished woman with a headset smiled warmly. "Of course, Mr. Carter. Dr. Hanson will be with you in just a moment. Please have a seat." As they turned from the desk, Marcus's eyes scanned the waiting room. They swept past me once, a flicker of non-recognition, and then they snapped back. The change in his expression was seismic. The confident smile dissolved, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His face went pale, a sickly white under the expensive lights. He stopped dead, his hand falling away from Isabella's back as if he'd been burned. "Amelia." He breathed, his voice a strangled whisper. What are you doing here?" Isabella looked from his terrified face to mine. Her own smile faltered, replaced by a look of polite confusion. She saw my own pregnant belly, and a flicker of something disbelief crossed her features. I rose slowly from my chair, the leather sighing its protest. I walked towards them, my steps measured and deliberate. I stopped a few feet away, creating a triangle of unbearable tension in the serene waiting room. The other couple in the room looked down at their phones, suddenly desperate to be anywhere else. "Hello, Marcus." I said, my voice as calm and cool as the glass table in Naomi's office. "Funny seeing you here. I thought you had a board meeting." His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. His eyes darted from me to Isabella, then back to me, the cogs of his treacherous mind, grinding, trying to formulate a lie that could possibly contain this catastrophe. Isabella took a hesitant step forward. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft, addressing me, but looking at Marcus for an explanation. "Do I know you?" "No, you don't." I said, my gaze locked on my husband. "But I know you. You're Isabella. I'm Amelia. Amelia Hayes. I'm Marcus's wife." The word wife hung in the air sharp and heavy as a guillotine. Isabella's face crumpled. The color drained from her cheeks, and her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes, wide with shock, shot to Marcus. "Wife Marcus, you told me you were separated. You said the divorce was almost final." Marcus finally found his voice, a desperate, pathetic rasp. "Amelia, this is not the time or the place. We can talk about this at home." "No," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. "I don't think we can. Because you see, Marcus, you won't be coming home, not today, not ever." I took a step closer, holding up the manila envelope. "This," I announced, my voice loud enough for everyone in the quiet room to hear, "is for you." I didn't hand it to him. I held it out, forcing him to take it. His hand trembled as he reached for the envelope, his confident facade completely shattered. He looked utterly broken, a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar, except the jar was our entire life. "What is this?" he stammered, fumbling with the clasp. "It's a court order." I said each word a precisely placed explosive charge. "A temporary restraining order, to be exact. It was granted ex parte by Judge Miller this morning. It freezes all of our joint financial assets. The bank accounts, the investment funds, everything, effective immediately. It also grants me exclusive use of the house. You are legally barred from the property. All the details are in there." I'd read it carefully if I were you. Marcus stared at the papers he'd pulled from the envelope, his face a canvas of disbelief and horror. The master of the universe, the man who controlled millions with a keystroke, had just been financially neutered. Isabella, meanwhile, was staring at my stomach. The reality of the situation was crashing down on her in waves. You're pregnant?" she whispered, her voice filled with a dawning, sickening understanding. "Very," I replied, not unkindly. 17 weeks, with his child, just like you." That was the final blow. Isabella let out a small, wounded sound and stumbled backward, catching herself on the arm of a chair. The lie wasn't just that he was married. The lie was total. He had sold her a future that was a mirror image of the one he'd promised me. She wasn't his one and only. She was his second in command, and she never even knew there was a first. Just then a door opened, and a woman in a white coat with a kind face appeared. "Marcus Carter," she said, her smile faltering as she took in the scene. "I'm Dr. Hanson. We're ready for you." Her voice trailed off as she registered the three of us, standing in a frozen tableau of misery and betrayal. Marcus looked up, his eyes wild with panic. He looked at the doctor, at the weeping Isabella, and finally at me. In my eyes, he found no sympathy, no lifeline, just the cool, hard finality of a demolition order. "I believe," I said, turning to the bewildered doctor, "that Mr. Carter will have to reschedule. He has some urgent legal and financial matters to attend to." I gave Frank, the process server, a slight nod. His job was done. He stood up, gave a grim, almost imperceptible nod back, and walked out, leaving the wreckage behind. I looked at Marcus one last time, at the architect of my pain, now standing amidst the ruins of his own making. I felt no triumph, no joy, just a vast, empty sense of closure. I had taken back control. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the clinic, leaving him to explain the unexplainable to the woman carrying a child he'd sworn was his future, with legal papers in his hand that proved his past had finally caught up with him. The lavender-scented air of the clinic gave way to the sharp, clean air of the city. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath of my new life. The drive home was surreal. The adrenaline that had coursed through me, a potent cocktail of rage and resolve, began to ebb, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I pulled into the driveway of the house, my house now according to the law. And for a moment, I just sat in the car, the engine ticking as it cooled. The stately brick home no longer looked like a fortress of dreams. It looked like a beautiful empty museum of a life that was no longer mine. Inside, the silence was absolute. It was no longer the tense, resentful silence of a failing marriage, but the clean, empty silence of a new beginning. I walked through the rooms, my hand trailing along the cool marble of the kitchen island, a place where Marcus and I had shared countless meals. I went upstairs and stood in the doorway of what was to be the nursery. The walls were still a neutral primer, waiting for the color I could never decide on. Now the blankness felt appropriate. It was a blank canvas. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my reverie. It was Naomi. "It's done," I said, my voice hollow. "I know." The process server called me. "You were magnificent," she said, her voice brimming with pride. "How are you, the real how?" "Empty," I admitted. "And tired. But I'm okay. I think I will be." "Good. Now listen to me, Amelia. This is just the beginning. He's going to retaliate. He'll call, he'll beg, he'll threaten. He'll try to get his own lawyer to vacate the TRO. Do not engage. Do not answer his calls. Let everything go through me. Are we clear?" "Crystal," I said. The first call came less than an hour later. "Marcus." I stared at the name on my screen and hit ignore. It was immediately followed by a text. "Amelia, please, we need to talk. This is a nightmare. You don't understand everything. I can explain." Then another. "I am locked out of our accounts. My cards are being declined. You can't do this. Think about our baby. His invoking of our child, the one he had so easily betrayed, sent a fresh wave of cold anger through me. I blocked his number without a second thought. The next few days were a blur of legal activity. Naomi was right. Marcus had hired one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the city, a man named Sterling Vance, whose specialty was making messy situations even messier. They immediately filed a motion to dissolve the TRO, claiming I was an emotionally unstable, vindictive spouse acting out of baseless jealousy. "Baseless," Naomi scoffed over the phone. "We have the condo lease, the wire transfer, the credit card statements, and a waiting room full of witnesses to his little domestic drama. Let them try." But as Naomi and her team dug deeper in preparation for the hearing, they uncovered something far more sinister than an affair. The $50,000 wire transfer and the lavish gifts weren't just coming from marital savings. They were part of a much larger, more desperate picture. "Amelia," Naomi said, her voice grim during a late-night call. "Marcus isn't just a cheat. He's in trouble. Deep trouble." It turned out that Marcus's volatile market wasn't just an excuse for late nights. His fund had taken a catastrophic hit 6 months ago on a series of high-risk energy trades. He hadn't just lost his investors' money. He'd lost a significant portion of our own personal fortune, which he had secretly leveraged without my knowledge. He was trying to hide the losses, shuffling money between accounts, borrowing from lines of credit, and trying to win it all back with even riskier bets. The affair with Isabella wasn't a symptom of boredom or a midlife crisis. It was part of his desperate fantasy. He was a sinking ship, and he'd been trying to build himself a brand new, shiny lifeboat, complete with a beautiful woman and a new baby, a testament to a success that was now pure fiction. The money he lavished on her wasn't just to keep her happy. It was to keep himself believing in the illusion that he was still the powerful, untouchable Marcus Carter. He hadn't been draining our assets simply to fund an affair. He had been hemorrhaging money everywhere in a desperate attempt to stay afloat. The TRO hadn't just cut off his access to his mistress. It had cut off his ability to continue his frantic shell game. We hadn't just exposed his infidelity. We had inadvertently lit the fuse on a financial time bomb. The twist didn't end there. 2 weeks after the showdown at the clinic, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simply, "A plea." My first instinct was to delete it, assuming it was Marcus trying to get around the block. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Ms. Hayes, it began. I know you have no reason to listen to me, and every reason to hate me. I do not expect your forgiveness. I am writing to you, because I believe we were both deceived, and I am in a situation I don't know how to handle. Marcus has not been answering my calls since that day. His promises have evaporated, along with his financial support. I have been served an eviction notice from the apartment he leased for me. I have spent the last 2 weeks questioning every single thing he ever told me. He lied about you. He lied about his divorce. He lied about the future he was building for us. It has made me question the one thing I thought was real, our child. I am writing to you to ask for something unimaginable. I have an appointment for a non-invasive prenatal paternity test next week. It requires a DNA sample from the potential father. Since he is unreachable, the lab said a sample from a known direct relative, like a legitimate child or a parent, could also work. Though a direct sample from the other woman involved in the affair is more accurate. I know this is an insane request, but would you consider providing a sample I need to know the truth? For my baby's sake. I need to know if my child is tied to that man, to his lies. Whatever the result, I will not bother you again. Sincerely, Isabella Rossi. I stared at the email, my mind reeling. My enemy, the other woman, was asking for my help. She was just as lost as I had been, cast adrift by the same man. She had been a villain in my story, but now I saw her as something else, a fellow victim. Our babies, conceived in deception on his part, tied us together in a bizarre, unfortunate sorority. My gut reaction was to say no. Why should I help her? Why should I lift a finger for the woman who had slept with my husband? But then I thought about her child, an innocent just like mine. Didn't that child deserve to be born into a world of truth, not one built on the shaky foundations of Marcus Carter's lies? And a part of me, the part that craved absolute certainty, needed to know too. I picked up my phone and forwarded the email to Naomi. Her reply was instantaneous. Holy hell. Don't answer yet. Let me think. An hour later, she called back. Okay, she said, her voice a mix of astonishment and strategic calculation. This is a gift from the legal gods. If that baby isn't his entire counter-narrative of being a man who fell in love with 2 women and wanted to do right by both his children completely implodes. It exposes him as nothing more than a common philanderer who was caught. So I should do it, I asked. Yes, Naomi said firmly, but on our terms. I'll have the lab results sent directly to my office. We control the information. This isn't about helping her, Amelia. This is about arming ourselves for the final battle. I knew she was right, legally. But as I drafted my reply to Isabella, I realized it was about more than that. It was about 2 women caught in one man's destructive storm, helping each other find a small patch of solid ground. Isabella, I wrote. I will do it. The decision to meet Isabella was one I made with my head, not my heart. My heart wanted nothing to do with her. It wanted to nurse its wounds in private, to seal off the part of my life Marcus had contaminated, and pretend it never existed. But Naomi's strategic voice echoed in my mind. We control the information. This is about arming ourselves. So I agreed, suggesting a sterile, anonymous cafe downtown, a place with no history for either of us. A clean slate for a dirty conversation. I arrived early, securing a secluded booth in the back. The cafe was a symphony of neutrals, much like the waiting room at the Genesis Clinic, but this time the beige tones felt less like a comfort and more like a void, I ordered a chamomile tea, and the warm mug did little to chase away the chill that had taken up permanent residence in my bones. I watched the door, my stomach, a knot of dread and grim determination. What does one say to the woman who was living a life parallel to your own, a life funded by your shared assets and built on the same foundation of lies? When Isabella finally walked in, she looked nothing like the confident, glowing woman I had confronted a few weeks prior. The designer dress was gone, replaced by simple jeans and a nondescript sweater. Her lustrous dark hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her face devoid of makeup was pale and haunted. She had been stripped of the borrowed glow Marcus had provided, and what was left was a young woman who looked lost and terrified. She scanned the cafe, her eyes wide and anxious, clutching a large, worn leather purse to her chest, as if it were a life raft. Our eyes met, and she flinched, taking a hesitant step before steeling herself and walking towards my booth. She slid onto the vinyl seat opposite me, placing the purse on the table between us like a barricade. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice a fragile whisper that was nearly swallowed by the cafe's ambient noise. "And for what you're doing. The test." I took a slow sip of my tea, letting the silence stretch, wanting her to understand that I was not here for pleasantries. "Let's be clear, Isabella," I said, my voice even and cold. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm certainly not doing it for him. I'm doing it because there are 2 children who will be born into this mess. They at least deserve the simple dignity of the truth." She winced but nodded, accepting the sharp edge of my words. She deserved it. "I understand," she said, looking down at her tightly clasped hands on the table. "He told me you were cold," she confessed, the words tumbling out, as if she could no longer hold them in. "Detached. He said the marriage was a formality, that you hadn't been in love for years. He painted this picture of you as this career-obsessed ice queen, and him as this lonely man, trapped and wanting a real family." Each word was a small, sharp sting. It was the classic cheater's handbook, painting the wife as a monster to justify his own monstrosity. "And you believed him?" I asked, a note of incredulity in my tone. "I wanted to," she admitted, her gaze finally lifting to meet mine. Her eyes were swimming with unshed tears. "He was so charming, so convincing. He'd talk about the divorce as if it were a done deal, just paperwork. He'd say things like, 'Amelia and I are just business partners now, we're better as co-parents.' He made it all sound so incredibly logical and civilized. Marcus is an expert at making betrayal sound civilized." I replied, the words tasting like ash. I watched her, and the burning hatred I had nurtured for weeks began to be complicated by an unwelcome feeling, a sliver of pity. She wasn't a master manipulator. She was a pawn, just as I had been, albeit a more willing one. He had identified her ambition and her loneliness, and had expertly woven a fantasy tailored just for her. "The day at the clinic," she continued, her voice cracking, "when I saw you, and I saw you were pregnant, it was like the world tilted off its axis. Every single thing he had ever built for me. The apartment, the gallery show, he funded the promises of us raising our baby in a brownstone. It all turned to dust. I wasn't his future. I was just his secret. I was the affair." "Welcome to the club," I said, the sarcasm a thin veil over my own remembered pain. "He was selling you a blueprint for a life he was already failing to build with me." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 women on opposite sides of the same shipwreck. I finally pushed a napkin dispenser towards her. "The test is tomorrow at 10. My lawyer, Naomi Bennett, has arranged for a courier from the lab. They will take my sample from her office and meet you at the collection center. The results will be sent directly and only to her." Isabella nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Thank you," she said again, her voice thick with emotion. I have to know. I can't bring a child into the world if he's tied to that man. To all those lies. That was the one thing we could agree on. Our meeting ended as awkwardly as it began. We were not allies. We were not friends. We were two separate parties with a mutual interest in uncovering the truth, a truth that we both suspected would be devastating in its own way. The week that followed was an exercise in controlled anxiety. I busied myself with practicalities, assembling a crib, washing tiny clothes, meeting with contractors to discuss renovating my home office into a brighter, sunnier space. But underneath it all, a low hum of anticipation vibrated through me. Every phone call made my heart leap. Naomi was a fortress of calm, assuring me that whatever the result, we were in a position of strength. "If it's his," she'd said in a call, "it proves his motive for draining the accounts. If it's not his, if it's not his Amelia, we're not just bringing a knife to a gunfight. We're bringing a nuclear bomb." The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was staring at a wall of paint swatches, trying to decide between sunbeam yellow and morning light when my phone rang with Naomi's name. I sank onto a nearby packing box, my hand trembling as I answered. "Are you sitting down?" Naomi asked, her voice taut with an energy I could feel through the phone. "I am now," I breathed. "I have the email with the certified lab report open on my screen," she said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. "It's a PDF, password protected. I just entered it." More silence. I could hear the faint click of her mouse. "Okay, I'm reading it. Exclusion. Amelia. The probability of paternity for Marcus Carter is 0%. I gasped the air, leaving my lungs in a rush. 0%. It wasn't just an exclusion. It was an annihilation of his entire narrative. All the drama, the second life the promises made to Isabella, the risk he took blowing up our marriage, all for a child that had absolutely no biological connection to him. The sheer tragic absurdity of it was overwhelming. "He's not the father," I whispered the words, feeling foreign and monumental. "He's not the father," Naomi confirmed, a note of savage triumph in her voice. "Our boy Marcus built an entire shadow family on a foundation of quicksand. This report doesn't just damage his legal case, Amelia. It demolishes it. It makes him a liar, a philanderer, and a fool all in one fell swoop. Sterling Vance can't spin this. No one can." Isabella's email followed a day later after Naomi had officially informed her lawyer. It was short and full of anguish. She had contacted her ex-boyfriend, the artist. After a tearful, difficult conversation, he had admitted it was a possibility. He was willing to take a test. She was humiliated and horrified, and she ended the email with a single chilling line. "I am now truly alone." I felt a pang of something cold and distant for her, but my focus was singular: the courtroom. The day of the hearing was grey and overcast, the sky the color of concrete. The courtroom itself was intimidating, all dark wood and high ceilings designed to make you feel small. Marcus was already there, standing beside his lawyer, Sterling Vance. Vance was the epitome of a high-priced attorney, impeccable suit, smug smile, and the predatory stillness of a shark. Marcus, however, looked like a man coming apart at the seams. His expensive suit hung on him, and he had the sallow, hollowed-out look of someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw a flicker of desperate hope in his. He still thought he could talk his way out of this. I met his gaze with a look as cold and hard as the marble floors. Vance began, his voice smooth and condescending. He painted a masterful, disgusting picture of me as the hysterical, hormonal, pregnant wife, emotionally unstable and prone to vengeful fantasies. He argued that the tool was an act of punitive aggression that was crippling Mr. Carter's ability to conduct business and manage his affairs. "Your Honor," he concluded, "this is a domestic dispute that has been escalated into a financial crucifixion by a woman scorned." Then it was Naomi's turn. She rose with a grace and confidence that seemed to suck all the air out of Vance's argument. She was a vision of lethal professionalism. "Your Honor," she began, her voice crisp and clear, "Mr. Vance's portrayal of my client is as fictional as his client's commitment to fidelity. This isn't about a woman scorned. It's about a marital partner protecting the marital estate from a man who has systematically defrauded it." One by one, she laid out the evidence: the lease for Isabella's condo, the credit card statements from Cartier, the wire transfer for $50,000. With each piece of paper she submitted, Vance's smug smile tightened. "My client does not deny the relationship," Vance countered smoothly, rising to his feet. "He is a man who regrettably fell in love with 2 women. It is a complicated human situation, but he is an honorable man. Your Honor, he was and is fully prepared to support both mothers and to be a father to both his children." Naomi's lips curved into a dangerous smile. It was the trap she had been waiting for him to walk into. "I find that claim about both his children particularly fascinating." "Your Honor," Naomi said, her voice resonating with theatrical gravity. She paused, letting the statement hang in the air. "Because while Mr. Carter was busy making these honorable plans, we were busy dealing in facts. And we have recently come into possession of a fact that fundamentally alters the nature of this entire case." She picked up a sealed, notarized envelope from her table and began to walk towards the judge's bench. The courtroom went silent. I could see Marcus's confusion, a slight furrow in his brow. He shot a look at Vance, who merely shrugged, confident in his position. "Your Honor," Naomi said, holding the envelope, "this is a certified lab report from a non-invasive prenatal paternity test performed on Ms. Isabella Rossi just last week. The results, I assure you, are quite conclusive." The word paternity detonated in the quiet room. Vance's jaw went slack. Marcus's face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of white. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. The judge peered over his glasses, his interest piqued. "Let me see that, Ms. Bennett." Naomi handed the report to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. As he read it, his eyebrows climbed his forehead. Naomi turned her body slightly, so she was addressing not just the judge, but the entire room, her gaze finally landing on Marcus like a judgment. "For the court's record," she announced, her voice ringing with finality, "the report concludes with 99.9% scientific certainty that Marcus Carter is not the biological father of Miss Rossi's child." A collective gasp went through the gallery. Sterling Vance looked as though he'd been electrocuted. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Marcus staggered backward, physically recoiling as if he'd been struck. The entire edifice of his deceit, his last pathetic claim to a shred of honor, had not just been cracked, it had been publicly pulverized. He was not a tragic hero torn between 2 loves. He was just a pathetic common cheat who had been caught a fool who had torched his own life for a fantasy that was never even real. The judge dropped the report on his desk and glared at Marcus with utter contempt. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice dripping with ice. "Given this new information, your client's entire argument seems to be predicated on a series of profound falsehoods. The motion to dissolve the temporary restraining order is denied. Ms. Hayes will retain exclusive use of the marital home, and the assets will remain frozen. I suggest you advise your client to cooperate fully from here on out." The fight evaporated from Marcus Carter that day. Humiliated, exposed, and financially crippled, he was a ghost. The final nail in his coffin was a call Naomi received not from Sterling Vance, but from the lead counsel for Carter Senior Capital. Marcus's father, Arthur Carter, was a titan of old money who valued reputation above all else. His son had become a public embarrassment and a financial liability. The message was cold and clear. Fix this, make it go away, and spare the family name any further disgrace. The divorce was no longer a negotiation. It was a surrender. The Carter family wanted silence. I wanted freedom. They agreed to a settlement that was swift and overwhelmingly in my favor. I received the house free and clear, a large ironclad trust for Lily's future, and a portion of the remaining assets that ensured I would never have to depend on anyone again. Months later, the grey skies of that courtroom battle felt like a distant memory. I stood in the nursery, bathed in the warm glow of the yellow paint I had finally chosen. In my arms, I held my daughter Lily, who was just over a month old. She was so small, so perfect, her chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of sleep. My daughter. My future. The grand house was quieter now, but the silence was filled with peace, not tension. It was no longer a monument to a failed partnership, but the foundation of a new life, a structure I was building on my own terms. I had walked through the wreckage, survived the demolition, and in the clean, sunlit space where my old life used to be, I was finally and truly home. Amelia's story is a harrowing reminder that sometimes the people we trust the most are capable of the deepest betrayals. But it's also a powerful testament to the strength that can be forged in the fires of heartbreak. She transformed herself from a victim of her husband's deceit into the architect of her own liberation. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her life, her name, and her future for herself and for her child. Her journey from silent suspicion to public vindication shows that when a foundation is rotten, the bravest thing you can do is tear it all down and build something true and beautiful in its place. What would you have done in Amelia's shoes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
After being betrayed, poor wife left with her son. Years later, the millionaire regretted it forever. They say time heals all wounds, but some scars never fade, especially the ones left by betrayal. Years ago, Clara Hathaway was a woman in love, swept into a world of wealth and privilege she never imagined. But in that world, she was never truly welcome. Humiliated, abandoned, and left to fend for herself while carrying a child, she walked away, determined to build a life on her own. Now, years later, the man who once cast her aside, the millionaire who had everything but valued nothing, is about to learn a painful lesson. Because fate has a way of turning tables, and when he finally comes face to face with the woman he wronged and the son he never knew, he realizes the greatest regret of his life wasn't losing his fortune. It was losing them. But is redemption possible? Or are some betrayals too deep to forgive? Stay with me as we uncover a story of love, loss, and a reckoning that will leave you speechless. Clara Hathaway was born in a small town outside Philadelphia, a place where summer nights buzzed with the chatter of cicadas and winter mornings glittered beneath fresh snow. Her mother, Margaret, worked long hours at a local diner. Her father, Charles, was a carpenter who never quite made ends meet. Despite their modest means, Clara was raised with immeasurable warmth and attention. She learned early on that one's value lay not in wealth, but in kindness and resilience. At 16, Clara discovered her talent for painting. She could transform a plain canvas into a riot of color and emotion, capturing sunsets, laughter, and heartbreak. To her father, she confided her deepest secret dream. Someday she wanted to see her artwork displayed in New York's famed galleries. He encouraged her to pursue it, always telling her, "You've got the heart of an artist, Clara. That's more valuable than any fortune." Fast forward to her college years at the University of Pennsylvania, where she studied fine arts. Despite scholarship assistance, she had to work part-time at a catering company to meet her living expenses. It was at one of these events, a lavish charity gala in downtown Philadelphia, where fate intervened. She was on the serving staff that evening, wearing a plain black uniform with a crisp white apron. Meanwhile, Alexander Sterling, who everyone called Alex, was in attendance with his equally affluent friends. He was a young entrepreneur from a rich Boston family, heir to the Sterling Industries empire. With sleek, dark hair and a confident smile, he carried an aura of effortless aristocracy. At that time he was 28, fresh from a triumphant business venture that netted him millions overnight. Alex was bored by the typical crowds at these high society events. Then his gaze landed on Clara, who was quietly serving champagne. Something about her delicate poise, the way she seemed comfortable in her own skin, even while hustling with a tray of glasses, captured his attention. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was doing her job, eyes shimmering with an unspoken dream. That night, he didn't immediately speak to her, but he remembered her face. An unexpected pang of curiosity gnawed at him. Days later, as if orchestrated by destiny, they crossed paths in the university courtyard. Clara, carrying art supplies, collided with him by accident. Charcoal sketches went flying into the wind. Alex knelt to help her gather them, and that fleeting moment crystallized something. A warmth in Clara's eyes contrasted sharply with the circle of opulence he was accustomed to. A conversation sparked, kindled by genuine interest. Their connection felt natural, like two pieces of a puzzle. Not long after, Alex asked her out for coffee. Clara, initially hesitant, finally agreed. Thus began a whirlwind romance that no one could have predicted, the up-and-coming millionaire and the down-to-earth artist. Their early relationship was woven with stolen kisses between classes, late-night walks by the Squealkill River, and confessions about their dreams for the future. She taught him how to see beauty in small things, while he introduced her to a world of infinite possibility and, admittedly, infinite temptations. In the eyes of the world, they were an odd pair, but in each other's eyes they found a perfect fit. Neither could foresee the heartbreak and public humiliations that would come, not in those early days when love seemed invincible beneath the star-swept sky. A year into their relationship, Clara began to see small fissures in Alex's otherwise flawless facade. While he showered her with gifts, a silver bracelet for her birthday, tickets to exclusive art shows, romantic weekend getaways, there was a guarded intensity lurking beneath his charm. He was fiercely ambitious, constantly surrounded by wealthy friends and business associates who had grown up in the same privileged circles. Clara found herself struggling to keep her footing in that environment. She was a self-made spirit, used to living frugally and working 2 part-time jobs. The ostentatious parties, the designer clothes, and the expensive champagne often felt alien. She tried her best to adapt because she loved Alex, and at times she couldn't help but feel like she was living in a dream, her new life a stark contrast to the diner in her hometown. However, she noticed that whenever Alex introduced her to his associates, an undercurrent of skepticism floated in the air. His friend group included names like Gregory "Greg" Ridley, the heir to a real estate empire, and Sabrina Marchant, a glamorous investor known for her strategic mind and predatory flair in business deals. They would smile politely at Clara, but she sensed their silent judgment. She's not one of us. It didn't help that Clara was fiercely independent and unwilling to let Alex pay her bills. When he insisted on buying her a brand new BMW for her 21st birthday, she politely declined. "I can't let you do that," she said softly, hoping to appease his pride. "I can't even afford the insurance." The tension spilled over during an after-party at Alex's penthouse suite in New York. Clara witnessed Alex stress out over the slightest thing, like if a waiter brought the wrong brand of sparkling water. She also overheard him on a heated phone call with an investor, using cutting words that alarmed her. She approached him afterward, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" He brushed her off with a forced smile. "Just business. You wouldn't understand." That one line stung. You wouldn't understand. It implied an intellectual or experiential gulf that set them apart. She swallowed her hurt, attributing his brusqueness to business pressure. But the cracks had begun, hairline fractures in a seemingly robust relationship. In a quieter moment, Alex confessed his frustration about his father's looming presence. "I have to prove myself, Clara," he said. "My father thinks I'm just coasting on the sterling name." This vulnerability opened a window into his insecurities. Suddenly Clara understood. Alex's arrogance was partly armor to hide a fear of not being good enough. She tried to reassure him, saying, "You're talented, Alex. You have everything you need to succeed on your own." But sometimes no amount of reassurance can fill the void of self-doubt. Life went on, with fleeting moments of joy overshadowing the creeping sense of disconnection. Clara painted, Alex hustled for bigger deals. They still found comfort in each other's arms at night, but beneath the surface, the first cracks in their gilded life were forming. Neither realized how deep those fissures would soon become. By the time Clara graduated, their relationship had evolved into an engagement. Alex proposed in the courtyard where they first met, presenting a stunning ring that glistened in the afternoon sun. Tears of happiness spilled down Clara's cheeks as she said yes. She thought it was the happiest day of her life, a promise that their love would weather any storms. They scheduled a wedding for the following spring at a luxurious vineyard estate owned by Alex's acquaintance, Sabrina Marchant. It was to be a grand ceremony with hundreds of guests, business moguls, celebrities, and politicians. Word traveled in social circles. The young sterling scion was marrying an art school graduate of humble background. In the months leading up to the wedding, Clara frequently felt like a fish out of water. Under the guise of offering help, Sabrina took it upon herself to criticize nearly every choice Clara made for the wedding. "Darling, that color is too pastel," she would say, or "those centerpieces look cheap." Greg Ridley chimed in with remarks like, "I hope you're prepared for the tabloids," or "Are you sure you can handle the sterling lifestyle?" One evening, the humiliations reached a fever pitch. Clara and Alex attended a charity banquet in Boston, hosted by a prominent figure named Howard Winchester. The event was as glamorous as it was exclusive, featuring a performance by renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma and a buffet catered by Chef Thomas Keller. Dressed in a pale blue gown, Clara clung to Alex's arm, trying to hide her nervousness. During dinner, an influential gallery owner named Meredith Walton approached their table. Clara had spent months yearning to meet someone like Meredith, hoping to secure a chance to showcase her art. Sensing an opportunity, Clara politely introduced herself, heart pounding. But before she could finish her sentence, Sabrina slid into the conversation, overshadowing Clara with boastful chatter. "Oh, Clara's art is nice," Sabrina said, her tone dripping with condescension. "She's got a lovely hobby, but her real focus, of course, is preparing for her new life as Mrs. Sterling." Laughter rippled around the table, though some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Clara's cheeks burned. She looked to Alex, hoping he would speak up, yet he remained silent, offering her a tight smile that seemed to say, "Let it go." Later, when Clara asked him why he hadn't defended her passion, he shrugged. They didn't mean any harm. You can't be so sensitive. Hurt swirled in her chest. She felt minimized, cast aside as a mere accessory. The seeds of humiliation had taken root, each subtle jab or dismissive remark blossoming into bruises on her self-esteem. She tried to brush them off, told herself love and patience would prevail. But a small, insistent voice in her mind asked, "What if this is my life from now on?" She pushed that question aside, burying it beneath wedding plans and the dream of a happy future. Yet deep down, Clara began to realize that the wealth and influence surrounding Alex were not just gilded frames. They could also be chains, locking her into a world she never asked to enter. When the wedding day finally arrived, it was a sight to behold. The vineyard estate boasted rows upon rows of lush grapevines, an elegant pergola adorned with white roses, and a gentle spring breeze that carried a hint of lavender. Clara wore a gown embroidered with delicate lace, her hair styled in a soft chignon. Alex, in a tailored black tuxedo, looked every bit the dashing groom. From the outside, everything was perfect. Their vows, exchanged under a bright sky, brought tears to many eyes. Clara felt a wave of love and hope, as if the humiliations and judgments of the past months had dissolved under the promise of a new beginning. Alex squeezed her hands and whispered, "I love you." In that moment, she believed him wholeheartedly, but the reception that followed signaled the turning point. The exuberant celebrations included a cocktail hour, a three-course dinner, and a band playing jazz standards. Among the well-wishers were many from the highest rungs of society, yet overshadowing the joy was a sense of competition and scrutiny. Every table buzzed with rumors about business deals, about who wore what designer label, about who was next in line for a board position. Clara felt more like a hostess to the wealthy crowd than a bride meant to be celebrated. Late into the evening, Alex's father, Lawrence Sterling, made a speech. He was a towering figure in a midnight blue suit, his hair silvered with age. Clearing his throat, he raised a glass. "A toast to my son and his lovely bride," he began, maintaining the veneer of paternal warmth. He extolled Alex's business achievements, commending the young man's instincts and cunning. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "And of course, we welcome Clara into our family. May she be an excellent companion to Alexander and, someday, a wonderful mother to his children." The wording was subtle, but Clara felt a slap of reality. She wondered, is that all I'm meant to be? A companion and a mother? Not a passionate artist with dreams of my own? From that night onward, Alex changed in small but significant ways. He grew more distant, immersing himself in expanding his empire. Their honeymoon was postponed due to pressing business matters. When Clara asked if they could still go for a shorter trip, he refused, saying, "We can't take half measures. I'll make it up to you." At first, Clara tried to be understanding. She painted in her new studio, a wedding gift from Alex, grateful for the chance to create. But the sense of disconnection nagged at her. Their intimate moments were overshadowed by his phone calls, dinners were rushed affairs, and he often returned home so late that she was already asleep. Then came the day she discovered she was pregnant. Clara felt joy surge within her. A new life was growing in her womb. She imagined a child who might inherit her artistic flair or Alex's quick mind. She hoped this news would draw them closer, heal the distant cracks that threatened to break them apart. But as she would soon find out, a new chapter of vulnerability and heartbreak was about to unfold, one that would test her strength in unimaginable ways. Pregnancy brought changes Clara hadn't anticipated. She experienced morning sickness, fatigue, and a roller coaster of emotions. Yet her excitement remained steadfast. She planned how the nursery would look: soft pastel walls, a handmade mobile, and whimsical watercolor paintings. She tried to share these hopes with Alex, but he was more concerned about scaling up his next acquisition. "We'll hire the best decorators," he said absently. "Don't stress yourself." Often Clara found herself alone in the Sterling mansion, the echo of her footsteps magnified by the emptiness. She confided her fears in Margaret, her mother, who offered gentle words over long phone calls. "You have to stand up for yourself, honey. He's your husband, but that doesn't mean you should lose your voice." When she was 6 months pregnant, Alex organized a business event at their home to showcase new developments under Sterling Industries. Among the attendees were Sabrina Marchant, Greg Ridley, and numerous corporate elites. Despite Clara's condition, Alex insisted she host the event to show the family side of Sterling's brand. That night, as servers circulated with champagne flutes and caviar, Clara tried her best to be the gracious hostess, but a guest, slightly tipsy, made a dismissive comment about Alex's charity case of a wife. Clara overheard it, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She glanced at Alex, hoping for some defense, some recognition that such a remark was unacceptable. Instead, Alex delivered the final blow. While speaking about the future of his company, he made an offhand joke, referencing the logistical challenge of an unexpected pregnancy, implying that fatherhood had caught him off guard at a critical time in his business. The crowd chuckled politely. Clara felt every muscle in her body tense. Tears blurred her vision. She retreated to a corner, physically ill. Instead of comforting her, Alex appeared irritated. "You're making a scene," he hissed, pulling her aside. "Can't you at least wait until the guests leave?" That was the moment something inside her snapped. She realized with crystal clarity that she, and now their unborn child, were nothing more than accessories in his carefully curated life. She packed a bag that very night, tears streaming down her face. The next morning, she told him she was leaving. His response was cold and laced with anger. "If you walk away now, don't expect to come crawling back," he said. Clara steeled herself. In a quiet voice, she replied, "I won't." Divorce proceedings began swiftly. Alex's high-powered lawyers tried to keep the affair discreet, but rumors circulated. After all, he was a prominent figure. Some tabloids gossiped that she was a gold digger, others portrayed Alex as a ruthless playboy. Only a few recognized the reality. Two people once in love, torn apart by pride and humiliation. By the time the papers were signed, Clara had moved out to a modest apartment in Philadelphia, determined to rebuild her life. She ignored the hush money the lawyers offered. All she asked was to raise her unborn child in peace. She had no illusions about the difficulty ahead, but she also felt a surge of liberation. For the first time in months, the humiliations had lost their power over her. She was ready to stand on her own, for herself and her child. Late autumn leaves swirled around Clara as she stepped out of the courthouse. The final divorce decree rested in her trembling hands, marking both an end and a beginning. She was 7 months pregnant, yet somehow lighter. Freed from the stifling environment of Alex's world, she could finally breathe again. She moved into a small rented apartment in a neighborhood near Center City. It wasn't luxurious. The paint was peeling in a few spots, and the pipes clanged when water heated. But it was hers. She set up her easel by the largest window, where natural light poured in. Every morning she would make a cup of herbal tea, rest her hand on her growing belly and whisper, "We'll be okay." The struggle to regain her footing was real. She had to find a new job despite her pregnancy. Thankfully, a friend from art school, Jennifer Delgado, recommended her for a part-time teaching position at a community center. The pay was modest, but it allowed Clara to share her love of painting with children from disadvantaged backgrounds. She found solace in their joyful energy, in their bright eyes brimming with curiosity. At night, Clara painted. She poured her heartache and hope onto the canvas, exploring themes of metamorphosis, flowers breaking through concrete, birds taking flight. To her surprise, some of her pieces caught the attention of a small local gallery owned by an older woman named Rose Williams. Rose admired Clara's raw emotion, and soon Clara had her first local exhibit. Though it was a modest affair, it felt monumental to her. With each stroke of her brush, she rebuilt the fragments of her identity. Meanwhile, Alex was nowhere in sight. The only time she heard his name was through the occasional news snippet or social media post touting Sterling Industries' latest triumph. While the tabloids briefly covered their divorce, interest waned when Clara refused interviews and Alex remained silent. Then came the day her water broke 2 weeks before her due date. Jennifer rushed her to the hospital. The delivery was neither simple nor painless, but after hours of labor, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom she named Lucas. In her arms, Lucas's tiny fingers curled around hers, and Clara felt an overwhelming surge of love. Tears of joy mingled with sorrow that Alex wasn't there, but she pushed that thought away. This was her moment, her new beginning. Motherhood was a whirlwind of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and constant worry. But the first time Lucas smiled at her, all the exhaustion melted into pure adoration. She vowed to provide him with a life rich in love and creativity, even if financial struggles persisted. Days turned into weeks, and soon Lucas was cooing and kicking in his baby gym. Clara found a new routine: teach painting classes at the community center in the morning, care for Lucas in the afternoon, paint at night when he slept. Each day brought small victories: Lucas rolling over for the first time, Clara selling a painting for a few $100s, and the glimmer of confidence returning to her eyes. Yes, life was harder now without the safety net of wealth. Yet in many ways, Clara felt more whole than she had in a long time. The humiliation from Alex's world still haunted her sometimes in her dreams, but each sunrise reminded her that she was free to pursue her own path, and that meant more than any fortune could buy. Lucas was the sun around which Clara's world now revolved. He had a head of dark hair, a cooing laugh, and eyes that sparkled with mischief. Even at just a few months old, he seemed alert to the colors and shapes around him, often babbling in delight when Clara painted. One chilly winter evening, as Clara gently rocked Lucas to sleep, she received a call from Margaret. Her mother was coming to visit. When Margaret arrived, she scooped Lucas up into her arms and showered him with grandmotherly affection. Margaret's eyes filled with pride at how her daughter had managed on her own. "You've done so well, sweetheart," she whispered, pressing a kiss to Clara's forehead. Still, the topic of Alex lingered like a ghost in the background. Margaret inquired politely, "Has he reached out?" Clara shook her head. Not once. Not even to check on Lucas. Her tone held sadness, but also resignation. She had made her choice, and she didn't regret it, at least not for her own sake. For Lucas, it was more complicated. She had once hoped that Lucas would know his father, but Alex's silence spoke volumes. In truth, Alex wasn't completely ignorant of Lucas's birth. He had been notified by his lawyers, who advised him on custody and support. Initially, Alex seemed content to settle everything through his legal team. Clara refused any large sums or monthly stipends. She worried that it might entangle her again in Alex's life on his terms. However, she didn't block him from acknowledging his child. She left that door open, hoping against hope that the father in him would care enough to walk through it. Time passed, and Lucas began to crawl. Clara took countless photographs of him, capturing every tiny milestone. She hung them on the walls, filling the apartment with memories instead of regrets. Occasionally, she posted a photo on social media, but only for a small circle of friends. She never tagged Alex, never sought his attention. Yet part of her still wondered, does he think about us? Behind the scenes, Alex was indeed thinking, though not in the ways Clara might have expected. He was consumed with regret, battling an internal war between pride and longing. He read every update his lawyer sent him about Lucas's progress. A part of him wanted to pick up the phone, to see his son for the first time. But another part, hardened by arrogance, believed that if Clara had really cared, she would have told him directly and invited him in. He rationalized his inaction with the thought that she chose to leave, so it was on her to bridge the gap. And so, father and son remained separated by ego and past hurts. Clara, meanwhile, focused on survival and small joys. She found time to paint whimsical scenes of mother and child, eventually selling them in the local gallery. She poured every ounce of love into Lucas, determined to give him the childhood she wished she'd had, one filled with security, affection, and an appreciation for life's simple wonders. No matter how tired she felt, or how her bank account dwindled some months, Clara never wished to return to the Sterling mansion. She had escaped a life that suffocated her soul. In her cozy apartment, rocking Lucas to sleep, she realized she had discovered something priceless, a sense of self-worth that no amount of wealth could ever replace. When Lucas turned 1, Clara threw a small birthday party in her apartment, inviting a handful of close friends from the community center and her mother. The atmosphere was filled with laughter, balloons, and the scent of a homemade vanilla cake. Lucas squealed in delight as he smeared frosting across his cheeks, his bright eyes dancing under the soft glow of fairy lights strung up around the living room. The party also marked a turning point for Clara's career. Rose Williams, the gallery owner who had taken an interest in her art, approached her with an exciting proposition, a solo exhibit showcasing Clara's motherhood-inspired series. Clara could hardly believe it. This opportunity was a beacon of hope, proof that she could stand on her own 2 feet, artistically and financially. In the weeks leading up to the exhibit, Clara poured her energy into creating her most personal paintings. Themes of rebirth, redemption, and maternal love dominated the canvases. She depicted silhouettes of mothers cradling their infants against dawn skies, phoenixes rising from ashes, a visual metaphor for her own transformation. Lucas often played at her feet, giggling and babbling as she worked. Whenever she felt a pang of self-doubt, she would look at him and remember why she had chosen this path. On the night of the exhibit's opening, a modest crowd gathered in Rose's gallery. The walls were lined with Clara's paintings, each radiating a sense of vulnerability and quiet strength. Jennifer Delgado was there, as was Margaret, who proudly told anyone within earshot, "That's my daughter's work." Among the guests was a familiar name, Meredith Walton, the influential gallery owner Clara had once tried to speak to at the charity banquet in Boston. Meredith had heard buzz about a raw, emotive collection by a rising artist and decided to attend. She introduced herself to Clara, this time with genuine interest. "Your work moves me," Meredith said. "There's honesty here that's rare in the art world." Clara felt her pulse quicken. She recalled how different things had been when Sabrina Marchant had overshadowed her in that humiliating conversation. Now she stood on her own, with her paintings speaking volumes. By the end of the evening, Meredith offered to collaborate, perhaps even connect Clara with larger galleries in New York. Clara agreed to stay in touch, feeling gratitude and excitement bloom within her. The success of the exhibit brought in sales, enough to allow Clara to upgrade her supplies and pay off some lingering medical bills from Lucas's birth. More importantly, it validated her decision to leave Alex and reclaim her life. Still, she couldn't escape a quiet sadness. She watched as other parents, particularly couples, strolled the gallery with their children. Lucas was happy, but he was missing something, a father figure. Clara had chosen to protect her son from an environment rife with humiliation and emotional neglect, but she wondered if she'd robbed him of the chance to know his dad. Each milestone in her success felt bittersweet, tinged with the memory of what once was. Yet for the first time, Clara felt truly alive, standing on her own merits. In her small corner of Philadelphia, with her son at her side, she was rising from the ashes of a broken marriage, forging her destiny with grace and determination. For Alex Sterling, life had continued in a superficial sense of triumph. He finalized a merger that doubled Sterling Industries' market share, earning him accolades from the business world. Lavish galas, black tie events, and high-stakes negotiations filled his calendar. To an outsider, it appeared he'd never been better. He was, after all, a multimillionaire still climbing the ranks of the ultra-wealthy. But beneath the polished exterior, Alex was haunted. Late at night, in the silence of his penthouse overlooking the city, he'd pour himself a glass of expensive scotch and stare at the city lights. His mind drifted to Clara, her laugh, her art, her unwavering gaze. He recalled how she used to rest her head on his shoulder, eyes closed, listening to the distant hum of traffic on the Schuylkill River. Now, every corner of his pristine home seemed devoid of warmth, filled only with the echoes of her absence. He'd received occasional updates from his lawyers about the baby boy, Lucas. Each time he felt a pang in his chest. His name was on the birth certificate. Clara hadn't contested that, but he had no relationship with his own son. Pride and shame kept him from reaching out. She left me, he told himself. She took my son with her. Yet a deeper truth gnawed at him. I pushed her away. One evening, Alex received an unexpected phone call from Sabrina Marchant. She was in town and wanted to meet for drinks. Initially, Alex hesitated. He knew Sabrina had always harbored more than a friendly interest in him. But he was lonely, and a part of him yearned for any distraction from the persistent regret. They met at a swanky rooftop bar, sipping imported wine under the glow of city skyscrapers. Sabrina talked about her latest conquests in the venture capital world, flaunting her cunning deals and high-profile connections. After a few drinks, she leaned in closer, placing a manicured hand on Alex's arm. "You know, you're better off without that artist," she said with a dismissive sneer. "She was never one of us." A wave of revulsion swept through Alex. It struck him how those words he might have once silently agreed with, now felt hollow and cruel. He recalled the look on Clara's face when Sabrina had humiliated her in Boston, how, in that moment, he hadn't stood up for the woman he claimed to love. Guilt swirled in his gut. He realized he couldn't stomach Sabrina's condescension anymore. Downing the last of his drink, he stood up abruptly. "I have to go," he muttered, ignoring her puzzled expression. Back in his penthouse, he paced the floor, wrestling with memories of Clara. He found himself scrolling through old photos on his phone, a snapshot of them at a farmer's market, another where Clara was laughing at something silly he'd said. He stopped at a picture of Clara, pregnant, her eyes glowing with anticipation. "I'm sorry," he whispered to no one, a lump in his throat. Within days, Alex caved to the urge he'd been resisting for over a year. He dialed the number his lawyer had given him, Clara's personal cell. It went straight to voicemail. Nervously, he left a brief message, voice trembling slightly. "Clara, it's Alex. I'd like to see Lucas and talk, if you're open to that." He hung up, heart pounding. Nothing he owned, no car, no mansion, no business success, could quell the fear of her rejection. For the first time, he laid bare a vulnerability that he'd spent his whole life hiding. Would she answer his call, or would she protect her heart and their son from the man who had failed them so profoundly? Clara's phone buzzed on a windy evening as she hurried into her apartment with groceries and a squirming Lucas in tow. Setting the bags down, she glanced at the screen and felt her heart jump. Missed call from Alexander Sterling. Voicemail 1. She stood frozen, conflicting emotions swirling in her chest. It had been nearly 2 years since she'd heard his voice. She pressed play, listening to Alex stumble through an awkward request to see Lucas. A chaotic mix of anger, sadness, and a faint sense of relief flooded her. He finally called. For days, Clara couldn't decide whether to return his call. She discussed it with Margaret, who advised caution, but acknowledged that Lucas might someday want to know his father. Jennifer, ever the supportive friend, offered a listening ear, encouraging Clara to do what was best for herself and Lucas, without letting Alex's wealth or past hurt cloud her judgment. Ultimately, Clara opted to send Alex a text, keeping it brief and neutral. "I received your voicemail. We can talk about Lucas. Call me tomorrow at 7 p.m. Her hands trembled as she typed. She felt like she was opening a door she'd bolted shut long ago. The next evening, Clara waited in her living room, Lucas asleep in his crib. When her phone rang at exactly 7 p.m., she answered, heart thudding. "Clara," Alex began hesitantly, "thank you for taking my call." Silence stretched as she weighed her words. "I'm not sure what you want, but if you're serious about meeting Lucas, we need to establish some boundaries." Alex sounded nervous, a tone Clara had never heard before. I understand. I'd just like a chance to see my son, and to apologize." She considered the vulnerability in his voice. "All right, but I want it in a public place. I'll text you the details." They decided on a family-friendly cafe near Clara's apartment for Saturday afternoon. The days leading up to that meeting felt excruciatingly slow. Clara painted feverishly, trying to settle her restless mind. She reminded herself that this was for Lucas, not for any lingering feelings. Saturday arrived, crisp and sunny. Clara dressed Lucas in a soft blue sweater. He toddled around, babbling excitedly. She bundled him into the stroller and walked the few blocks to the cafe. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of freshly baked bread. She spotted Alex at a corner table, dressed in a casual jacket. No polished corporate suit, no entourage. He looked thinner, his hair slightly disheveled. When he saw them, he stood up, hands trembling at his sides. His eyes locked onto Lucas, who peered up at him curiously. Clara felt a pang in her chest when she noticed the glimmer of emotion in Alex's eyes, an unspoken regret and longing. "Hi," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex knelt down, meeting Lucas at eye level. "Hello, Lucas," he said gently. Lucas clung to Clara's leg, but stared at Alex with wide eyes. After a moment, Alex smiled tentatively, and to Clara's surprise, Lucas giggled. A wave of relief washed over Alex's face, as though he'd been granted permission to feel something he'd denied himself for too long. Thus began the first step toward an uncertain future. Their paths had collided once again, not as husband and wife, but as two people bound by a child, each carrying wounds that had yet to heal. The meeting at the cafe lasted over an hour. Clara sipped tea while Lucas, sitting in a high chair, snacked on crackers. Across the table, Alex's gaze shifted between his son and the woman he once called his wife. He tried to make small talk about Lucas's milestones, faltering in the face of Clara's guarded demeanor. Eventually, Clara found the courage to be direct. "Why now, Alex?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with vulnerability. "You ignored us when I was pregnant, during Lucas's birth, his first steps. Why reach out now?" Alex swallowed hard. "I've thought about calling you every day. I was too ashamed and too stubborn." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I handled everything poorly, Clara. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be a part of Lucas's life, if you'll let me." She studied him, trying to decipher whether his remorse was genuine or just another flash of guilt that would fade. Alex's eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, and his usual confidence seemed replaced by an almost childlike anxiety. For a moment, Clara remembered the Alex she first fell in love with, the one who wasn't afraid to kneel on a university courtyard to pick up her scattered sketches. "You have to understand," she began, voice trembling with pent-up hurt. "I tried to fit into your world. I tried to be the person you wanted me to be, but all I got was humiliation, and you just stood there, or worse, you joined in." She felt tears prick her eyes, but she fought them back, not wanting to break down in a public place. "I left to protect myself and Lucas. I won't expose him to that kind of environment where we're never good enough." Alex nodded, remorse evident. "I can't take back the things I said or did, but I've cut ties with people like Sabrina. I've been re-evaluating everything in my life. The bigger the empire I built, the emptier I felt." He glanced at Lucas, who was now trying to shove a cracker into his mouth with clumsy toddler hands. Meeting him, it's like seeing the part of me that could still be good. For a brief moment, time stood still. Clara recognized genuine regret, the kind that shifts a person from the inside out. Still, her trust in him was broken. She refused to make any immediate promises. "I'll think about letting you see Lucas more," she said, her voice measured. "But let's keep it slow. Visits in public places, no overnight stays yet. And if at any point I feel Lucas's well-being is compromised, I'll end it." Alex's shoulders sagged in relief. "Thank you," he breathed. They agreed to meet again. Clara packed up Lucas, who waved bye-bye in his toddler way. As she pushed the stroller out of the cafe, she felt an odd mixture of turmoil and cautious hope. She had confronted the man who had once broken her heart and left her carrying both a child and the weight of his disregard. Whether he could mend those wounds was uncertain, but for Lucas's sake, she was willing to try. In the following weeks, Alex slowly integrated himself into Lucas's life. The visits were sporadic at first, an hour at the park on a Saturday afternoon, or a quick lunch at a child-friendly restaurant. Clara watched him from a careful distance, observing how he interacted with their son. To her cautious surprise, Alex displayed genuine care. He pushed Lucas on the swing set, helped him learn new words by pointing at objects, tree, dog, sky, and even seemed entranced by Lucas's smallest gestures. The old arrogance that once defined him was largely absent. In its place was an awkwardness reminiscent of someone trying to make amends. Yet the road was anything but smooth. One afternoon, Alex appeared with a pricey remote-controlled car for Lucas. Clara immediately bristled. She pulled Alex aside. "He's two, Alex. He doesn't need something so extravagant," she said in a hushed, tense voice. Alex looked confused and slightly hurt. "I just wanted to give him a nice gift." Clara sighed, trying to calm her frustration. "He's a toddler. He values time and attention more than expensive gifts. Don't try to buy his affection." Alex's jaw tightened, but he nodded, placing the toy car aside. Clara recognized the tension in his expression. He was so used to solving problems with money. Part of her pitied him for not knowing another way. Slowly, she began to see that it wasn't just about Lucas. Alex was trying to learn to be a different man, and sometimes old habits died hard. Outside of these visits, Clara's life remained busy. Her artwork was gaining more recognition, and she juggled teaching at the community center with raising Lucas. Margaret visited often to babysit, giving Clara time to travel for potential gallery shows. On some nights, when Lucas was asleep, Clara would stare at her phone, half expecting a text from Alex. Though they spoke frequently about logistics, they never once delved into their relationship. Inevitably, the moment came when Alex asked, "Can I take Lucas to my place for a day?" He mentioned he'd baby-proofed his penthouse, ensuring every sharp corner and electrical outlet was secured. Clara hesitated. The idea of Lucas in the environment that had once suffocated her brought back painful memories, but she also sensed that keeping Lucas away forever wasn't fair to either of them. "All right," she said slowly, "but just for the afternoon, and I want to come with him the first time to make sure everything's okay." The day they visited Alex's penthouse, Clara felt a swirl of emotions. The modern decor, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, everything was painfully familiar and yet distant. She remembered countless nights here, feeling invisible, overshadowed by Alex's social circle. But this time, no crowd of wealthy friends awaited her. Instead, it was just Alex, who had a nervous energy about him as he greeted Lucas. She walked through the rooms, verifying that indeed the sharp corners were padded, the electrical sockets covered. The fridge was stocked with child-friendly snacks, and there was even a small corner filled with stuffed animals and building blocks. Alex had clearly made an effort. Despite the tension in the air, Clara was struck by a sense of possibility. People could change, given the chance and the will. She didn't know if she was ready to forgive Alex for all his past wrongs, but she recognized that he was trying. Maybe that counted for something. Nevertheless, she reminded herself, trust was a fragile vessel, easily shattered and painstakingly repaired. The question that lingered in her mind was whether their fractured bond could ever truly be mended. Months passed, and Alex became a regular part of Lucas's life. Saturdays were spent at the park or the children's museum. Wednesday afternoons, Alex would drop by the community center after Clara's classes ended, offering to help carry her supplies or simply watch Lucas color with crayons. Over time, Clara could see the bond forming between father and son. Yet the dynamics between the two adults remained fraught with unspoken feelings. Their conversations revolved around Lucas, his preschool options, his new favorite foods, the adorable drawings he made. They carefully skirted around their past relationship, though the tension between them was palpable. One rainy evening, after they had taken Lucas to a puppet show, Alex offered to drive Clara and Lucas home. Lucas dozed off in the back seat, lulled by the patter of raindrops on the window. As Alex pulled up in front of Clara's building, he hesitated. "Could I come up for a minute? I'd like to help put Lucas to bed, if that's okay." Clara bit her lip, torn. She finally nodded. "All right, but just for a minute." Inside, Alex gently carried Lucas to his small bedroom, tucking him into his toddler bed. He paused, gazing at the child's serene face. Clara stood in the doorway, arms folded, unsure how to handle this sudden intimacy. When Alex emerged, he lingered in the hallway, their eyes meeting in the dim glow of a nightlight. 1,000 emotions welled up in Clara: love, anger, hurt, longing. She opened her mouth to speak, but words failed her. Alex, too, seemed at a loss. Finally he sighed heavily. I'm sorry, Clara, for everything." His voice trembled. "Leaving you alone while you were pregnant, not defending you when you needed it most. If I could go back—" "You can't," Clara interrupted, her voice steady. "Neither of us can change the past." Silence enveloped them, punctuated only by Lucas's soft breathing. Clara tried to remain composed, but tears gathered in her eyes. "You broke my trust, Alex. You let others treat me like I was nothing, and you treated me that way too." Alex reached out tentatively, but he didn't touch her. "I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." His eyes glistened under the faint light. "But I also know that I want to be here, with you and Lucas, in any way you'll let me." A storm of conflicting emotions roared within her. She was exhausted from carrying the weight of betrayal for so long. She had built walls to protect herself, but now those walls were trembling. She let out a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again the way I once did," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I'll earn it back," he promised, a determined softness to his tone, "even if it takes years." They stood there, hearts raw and exposed, two broken souls trying to find a way forward. In that moment, Clara felt an odd sense of comfort in his presence. Despite the pain, there was still a spark, faint and wounded, but alive. She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then keep showing up, for Lucas, for me. We'll see where that leads." Alex pressed his lips together, fighting back his own tears. "I will." And so they ended the night not with a passionate reunion, but with a promise to try. Sometimes the path to mended hearts begins not with a grand gesture, but with small steps born of genuine remorse and cautious hope. Over the next year, the delicate dance between Clara and Alex continued. Their progress was marked not by dramatic declarations, but by incremental shifts in how they treated each other, how they learned to co-parent, and how they faced the remnants of their shared past. Alex began attending Lucas's preschool events. At first, he would sit in the back row, cautious not to overstep, while Clara hovered protectively near their son. Over time, teachers and other parents grew used to seeing them together, albeit not as a traditional couple. Lucas's face lit up whenever both Mommy and Daddy appeared at the same event. The child's obvious joy pulled them closer in ways neither anticipated. Clara's art career continued to blossom. Her exhibit with Meredith Walton in New York was a modest triumph, garnering positive reviews in a few reputable art magazines. She found herself being commissioned for bespoke pieces, portraits, custom murals, and even a collaboration with a local non-profit to create a mural depicting family unity in a struggling community. Through her art, she channeled not just her pain, but also her healing. Alex, for his part, made conspicuous efforts to distance himself from his former social circle. He resigned from exclusive clubs where Sabrina Marchant and Greg Ridley reigned supreme, opting instead to invest his time and capital in philanthropic ventures. He funded scholarships at community art centers. He launched an initiative to develop affordable housing in Philadelphia's underserved neighborhoods. Though part of his motivation was altruistic, another part was personal. He wanted to become a man worthy of Clara's forgiveness, or at least her respect. In time, Alex also reached out to Margaret, inviting her over for a cordial lunch. The conversation was polite, laced with the awkwardness of two people who had once been family and were now working toward mutual understanding. Margaret was cautious but civil, recognizing that Alex was, indeed, making an effort to atone. An unexpected twist came when Clara was invited to showcase her work at a high-end art festival. The venue, a sprawling estate in Napa Valley, a location that stirred memories of her ill-fated wedding. When she hesitated to accept, Meredith Walton encouraged her to embrace the opportunity. "Your art deserves that stage, Clara. Don't let old wounds rob you of new victories." After weighing her options, Clara agreed, deciding that facing her painful memories might help her move forward. As the festival date approached, she learned the estate hosting the event was none other than one owned by the Marchant family. Sabrina was rumored to be involved in the festival's planning. The prospect of seeing her again made Clara's stomach churn, but she pushed aside her discomfort in favor of professionalism. Alex found out about the show and, without hesitation, offered to accompany Clara and Lucas for support. At first, she refused. She didn't want any drama overshadowing her art. But as the date loomed, Clara recognized that having Alex there to watch Lucas would free her to focus on her exhibit. Reluctantly, she agreed. When they arrived in Napa, the air was thick with tension. The vineyard sprawled across rolling hills, the vines heavy with ripening grapes. Clara couldn't help but recall her wedding day, the same sweet scent of grapes in the air, the same manicured rose. This time, instead of wearing a bridal gown, she wore a simple linen dress, splattered with paint. In her arms was a portfolio of new pieces, reflective of her evolution, both as an artist and a person. She quickly set up her station. The festival drew in wealthy patrons, gallery owners from across the country, and socialites who loved to flaunt their taste for culture. Among them was Sabrina Marchant, who glided through the crowd in a sleek designer dress, exuding the same arrogant confidence as ever. Sabrina paused at Clara's display, her gaze flicking over the paintings with a detached curiosity. "You've improved," she remarked, a note of patronizing surprise in her voice. "I suppose motherhood can inspire creativity in some women." Clara steadied her breath, determined not to let Sabrina's condescension unravel her composure. Before Clara could respond, Alex stepped into view, Lucas in tow. The sight of Alex beside Clara seemed to jolt Sabrina, her usual cool demeanor cracking for a moment. She plastered on a grin. "Alex, darling, I didn't expect to see you here, and with the family no less." Lucas sensed the tension and clung to Clara's leg. Alex, voice calm but firm, replied, "I'm here to support Clara. This is her show." Sabrina's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? Well, how domestic of you." Her gaze drifted to Clara's ringless hand, a smirk playing on her lips as though to remind them all of the past humiliation. Clara felt the old sting, but she met Sabrina's gaze evenly. "Thank you for hosting such a wonderful festival," she said politely, refusing to be goaded into conflict. She reminded herself that she was no longer the shy, easily intimidated woman Sabrina had once belittled. After an awkward silence, Sabrina retreated to mingle with other guests. Alex placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Clara nodded, exhaling. "Yes, I am." She realized the words felt true. She was okay. Seeing Sabrina no longer held the power to devastate her, she'd grown stronger, armed with self-worth and the knowledge that her art and her life could stand on its own. As the festival progressed, Clara's booth attracted genuine interest. A few collectors expressed intent to purchase her paintings. One of them was a famous musician, evidently struck by the raw emotion in her work. Another was a seasoned art curator from San Francisco, who invited Clara to join a group exhibition. By the end of the day, Clara had sold 3 of her pieces, netting more in a single afternoon than she used to earn in a month. She felt a dizzying mix of pride and humility. When Lucas raised his arms, demanding to be carried, Clara scooped him up and kissed his cheek. This was the life she'd fought for, a balance of motherhood, artistic fulfillment, and emotional independence. Alex, who had been standing by with a quiet smile, approached after the curator left. "Congratulations," he said. "I'm proud of you." Something about his tone made Clara look up. She saw tears brimming in his eyes, tears of genuine admiration. For a moment she felt the rush of old emotions, how she once believed in a future with this man, yet she also remembered the heartbreak he'd caused. Still, she allowed herself a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she replied. "That means a lot." That evening they attended a private reception for participating artists. Lucas stayed at the hotel with a trusted babysitter. Guests mingled under strings of fairy lights, sipping wine and sampling canapes. The afterglow of her successful day lingered around Clara, giving her a buoyant confidence. Alex hovered near her, engaging in light conversation about her artwork. When the event ended, they found themselves walking along a moonlit path between the grapevines, the night air fragrant with ripe fruit. Soft music floated from the distance, and the sky was ablaze with stars. Clara paused by a wooden fence, gazing out at the vineyard under the silver glow of the moon. The memories of her wedding day, of humiliations endured in this very environment, resurfaced. Yet, this time, she didn't feel the crushing weight of those memories. Instead, she felt a quiet release, as if the vineyard's night breeze carried away the last remnants of her pain. Alex stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "I've been thinking," he said softly, "about how much has changed since we were here last. How much I've changed." She turned to him, caught off guard by his earnestness. He continued, voice tremulous. "I was so blind, Clara. Obsessed with proving myself, with living up to my father's expectations. I didn't realize I was stomping on the very love that gave my life meaning." Clara's throat tightened. "We both made choices," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I'm grateful for Lucas, but the pain we went through, sometimes it still feels so fresh." Alex nodded. "I know it's not something we can just forget, but I want you to know that I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making amends, if that's what it takes." Silence enveloped them, punctuated by the quiet hum of insects in the vineyard. Slowly, tentatively, Alex reached for Clara's hand. She didn't pull away. The warmth of his touch sent a cascade of emotions through her: regret, longing, affection, and an ever-present caution. She looked down at their hands, remembering how once upon a time their fingers entwined so naturally. "I don't know if we can ever go back to how we were," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I'm not asking to go back," Alex said. "I want to move forward, start anew, if we can. Even if it's just as co-parents who respect each other. But if there's a chance, even the slightest possibility, that we can rebuild something, I want that chance." Clara let out a shaky breath. "I'm scared. Our history it's messy." He nodded, eyes glimmering. "I'm scared too, but it's a good kind of fear, like stepping onto a stage to perform something meaningful." She closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. The memory of his earlier betrayals was still there, but so was this raw, honest version of Alex, who had spent the past year proving that he could be better. She had seen him cradle Lucas with care, volunteer at the community centre, support her art career without overshadowing it, apologise to Margaret, actions that spoke louder than any words. When she opened her eyes, she found him watching her, breath held. She gave the faintest nod, exhaling softly. "Let's see where this goes, one step at a time." A tear slipped down Alex's cheek and he gently brushed it away, a soft laugh escaping his lips. He pulled her into a careful embrace, as though he might scare her off if he held on too tight. She rested her head against his shoulder, inhaling the faint scent of his cologne, mixed with the sweet vineyard air. In that quiet moment, they weren't the broken couple they once were. They were two people forging a path toward redemption and, possibly, rediscovering love. In the months that followed, Clara and Alex navigated a new phase of their relationship. They saw a counselor together to address their past traumas, learned how to communicate without letting bitterness devour them. They fell into a rhythm of co-parenting that gradually blossomed into genuine partnership, and then something deeper. Their reconciliation didn't happen overnight. Clara insisted on maintaining her independence. She refused to move back into Alex's penthouse until she was certain this was what she wanted, not just what felt familiar. Alex respected her wishes, suggesting only that he spend more time in her apartment so Lucas wouldn't have to shuttle between two homes constantly. In the years to come, they built a life grounded in shared purpose. Clara opened her own art studio, mentoring young artists who faced financial barriers, much like she had in her youth. Alex continued to expand his philanthropic work, pouring resources into educational programs and community developments. Lucas grew up surrounded by a blend of creativity and compassion, learning that success meant more than money. It meant empathy, perseverance, and the courage to rectify one's mistakes. On quiet evenings, Clara and Alex often sat together in her studio. She painted, and he read or tinkered with business proposals on a tablet. Every so often he would glance up, catching her eye with a smile that said, "I'm grateful." She would smile back, painting a bright new stroke of color that symbolized hope on a canvas that was once filled with sorrow. And that, perhaps, was the truest form of a happy ending. Not a perfect life, but a real one, where two flawed individuals, bound by love and redemption, found the courage to forgive, to grow, and to create a future that honored the pains of the past without being defined by them. They had learned that sometimes the greatest fortune in the world lies not in riches or social standing, but in the fragile, resilient connection between two hearts, and the child who made their love story worth saving. And so, Clara and Alex's journey wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about rebuilding the future, one step at a time. From betrayal to redemption, from heartbreak to healing, they discovered that true love isn't just about grand gestures or second chances. It's about growth, accountability, and the courage to make things right. But what do you think? Can love truly conquer all? Would you have given Alex another chance, or was Clara's decision too forgiving? Let me know in the comments below.